my house! I never want to see you again!
The screen opens on silence, then a sudden violent crash. The front door slams open, splintering the frame. Papers flutter through the air. A woman, perfectly groomed, wild-eyed, storms inside, waving a clipboard like a weapon. I don't move. I just stand there, watching, calm. Her heels click against the hardwood like gunshots. "You've ignored 3 violation notices," she shouts. "Unapproved mailbox color, overgrown hedges, and that truck in your driveway. This is a residential neighborhood, not a scrapyard." I blink slowly. "Ma'am, you're in my house." She doesn't care. She keeps pacing, voice rising. "As acting president of the HOA, I have every right to inspect." "Inspect?" I interrupt, voice steady. "You broke down my door," she scoffs. "Don't play victim. You people think the rules don't apply to you." She grabs my phone off the counter, waving it like evidence. "I'll be reporting this to the board." I take one step forward, my tone still calm. "The moment she touched my phone," I say quietly, "I knew exactly how this was going to end." Camera cuts to black. A soft rewind sound plays. 3 weeks earlier, I thought I'd finally found peace. When I bought the house, I thought I was buying peace. A quiet street. Neighbors who waved. Kids riding bikes with helmets too big for their heads. A couple of golden retrievers sleeping on front porches. After 22 years in law enforcement, I figured I'd earned it. Mornings with coffee instead of crime scenes. Nights without sirens echoing in my head. For the first few weeks, it was everything I hoped for. The neighborhood looked like a postcard. Perfectly trimmed lawns, mailboxes in a straight soldier's row, not a trash can in sight. Everyone smiled when they passed by, but it was the kind of smile that didn't quite reach the eyes. The kind you give when you're watching and judging. That's when I met her, Karen, though her real name was Brenda Stewart, according to the HOA newsletter that landed on my doorstep 2 days after I moved in. She introduced herself within an hour of the moving truck pulling away. Clipboard in hand, sunglasses perched on her head like a crown, she marched up my driveway like she was inspecting a new recruit. "Welcome to Oak Ridge Estates," she chirped, flashing that over-rehearsed smile. "I'm the HOA president, just making sure everything's up to community standards." I smiled back because old habits die hard. "Appreciate it. Just getting settled." Her gaze scanned every inch of my yard. The grass, the mailbox, the color of the shutters. She scribbled something on her clipboard. "You'll love it here," she said, though her tone made it sound like a threat more than a promise. That was my first introduction to how this place worked. For a while, things stayed polite. A wave here, a forced good morning there. But a week later, I got my first letter. Notice of violation. Garbage bins visible from the street. Fair enough. I had left one out after trash pickup. I wheeled it back in, didn't think much of it, then came another. Mailbox height exceeds HOA standard by 2 inches. That one made me laugh. I even took out a tape measure. 2 inches exactly, give or take a slant in the sidewalk. I adjusted it anyway, thinking that would be the end of it. It wasn't. Next, it was the flag on my porch, apparently the wrong shade of blue. Then, my truck, too commercial looking for a residential driveway. Even though it was a stock pickup with no decals, it was like she had a personal radar for minor imperfections. And I started noticing that she didn't bother anyone else quite as often. Only me. At first, I tried to stay civil. I'd spent my entire career keeping calm while people screamed, lied, and tried to talk their way out of handcuffs. Surely I could handle one overzealous HOA president. But politeness only seemed to encourage her. She started dropping by, uninvited, pretending to take photos of the neighborhood, but somehow always ending up in front of my house. She'd make these fake-friendly comments like, "Oh, I see you finally trimmed the hedge. Good for you." Or, "We prefer a softer light for porch bulbs. Helps maintain the community's aesthetic." The way she said we made it sound like she owned the place. Then the whispers started. One neighbor, an older man who watered his lawn religiously at 6 a.m., pulled me aside one morning. "You seem like a good guy," he said quietly. "Word of advice, don't get on her bad side." "Why's that?" "She's ruined people," he said simply. One family moved out after 6 months. Another got sued for non-compliance. Fence paint color. Can you believe that? Fence paint. I believed it. Another neighbor, a young mom with a stroller, told me Brenda once called CPS on her because her kid left chalk drawings on the sidewalk. Said it defaced community property, she whispered. She's got friends on the board in the county office. Or at least she says she does. It wasn't just control. It was power. Or the illusion of it. And she thrived on it. One evening, I found her standing at the edge of my yard staring at my front porch light. No clipboard this time. Just her phone, camera raised. I opened the door and stepped outside. Something I can help you with? She jumped slightly, then smiled. That fake, sugary grin. Just taking documentation for the next HOA report. Your porch light seems unusually bright. Unusually bright? I repeated, trying not to laugh. It's a 60-watt bulb, she didn't respond. Just kept recording, muttering something about consistency standards. That was the first moment I felt it. Not annoyance, but unease. Because people like Brenda didn't stop. They escalated. A few nights later, I found an envelope taped to my door. No return address. No HOA letterhead. Just a printed message. Compliance is not optional. You're being watched. I stood there for a long time, reading it over and over. The words weren't threatening in a direct way, but the intent was clear. She wanted me rattled. I thought about calling the police, but then I remembered I was the police once. And people like her always slipped just under the line of legality. That night, I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee, staring out into the perfect little street. Every house looked the same, symmetrical, pristine, controlled. But beneath the glow of porch lights, I could feel the tension humming, like a wire pulled too tight. I'd moved here to heal, to leave behind years of chasing criminals and reading the worst of humanity in people's eyes. Now, I was realizing that monsters don't always break into your house wearing masks. Sometimes they live next door, smiling, waving, holding a clipboard. The next morning, I woke to the sound of footsteps in my yard. I looked out the window, and there she was, standing on my grass, snapping photos of my truck. That was it. I opened the door, my voice low and steady. "Ma'am, you're trespassing." She froze, then gave me that smirk, the one that told me she thought she was untouchable. "Just conducting a compliance inspection," she said. "It's within my rights." Not on my property, it's not. For a long moment, we just stood there staring each other down. The suburban sun shining, the sprinklers ticking, the air too calm for what was brewing beneath it. Then she huffed, turned on her heel and marched off without another word. But as she left, I noticed her pull out her phone and start typing furiously, probably to the board, or her so-called friends in the county. That's when I knew this wasn't over. I closed the door, leaned against it, and exhaled. I'd spent decades navigating crime scenes, interrogations and hostage negotiations, but this was something else. Because Karen, Brenda, wasn't just breaking rules. She was the rules, at least in her own mind, and people like that never stop until someone makes them, but the day she trespassed on my property, the war officially began. By the second month, peace was officially dead in Oak Ridge Estates. It started small, again. Karen had a way of pushing limits 1 inch at a time, like testing how far she could reach before someone smacked her hand away. Every morning I'd find new violation letters taped to my door. The hedge was non-compliant, my curtains were the wrong shade, and apparently, the flag I hung on my porch wasn't within approved dimensions. Each letter was unsigned. No HOA logo, no proper documentation. Just plain white paper with red ink and that same clipped tone she always used when she wanted to sound important. Then came the photos. I caught a flash one evening through my kitchen window, a camera shutter. She was leaning over my fence, snapping pictures of my backyard like she was with CSI. I stepped outside and said, "Evening, Brenda." She froze. "Just documenting property concerns," she said, not even pretending to be embarrassed. "From my property line?" She tilted her head, smile sharp enough to cut. "If you have nothing to hide, you shouldn't mind." I minded. That night, I installed cameras. Not big, obvious ones. Subtle, motion-triggered, tucked into corners and garden lights. I'd done surveillance for a living. I knew how to make people reveal themselves. I told myself it wasn't paranoia. It was precaution. Still, I couldn't help but wonder, why was she like this? Maybe her life was small. Maybe controlling others gave her meaning. Maybe she'd spent so long policing paint colors and mailbox heights that she'd forgotten what it meant to just Liv, it's strange. In law enforcement, I'd seen the worst of humanity, but I'd also learned that evil doesn't always come from malice. Sometimes it comes from emptiness, and Karen Stewart was a very empty woman. Then came the rumors. I'd be mowing the lawn and hear whispers over fences. He's aggressive. Did you hear he threatened her? I think he's got a criminal record. At first I ignored it. But one afternoon my mail didn't arrive. And the next day, one of the fake HOA letters included details only found in private correspondence. That was the breaking point. I reviewed my camera footage, and there it was. Karen, at 2:17 p.m., walking up to my mailbox, glancing around, and sliding one envelope out, then slipping a notice in its place. She didn't even try to hide it. She was smiling. I remember sitting there watching that footage on loop, coffee going cold in my hand. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was calm, too calm. The kind of calm that comes right before a storm. So I started playing chess. Every letter she delivered went straight to a folder. Every rumor she spread I traced back to its source. I talked to the neighbors she'd manipulated and let them talk. No accusations, just quiet questions that made her story unravel itself. Then, one night, she went too far. It was around 11:45 p.m. I'd just sat down in the living room, checking the security feed when the motion alert pinged. Front door, movement detected. I muted the lights and watched. Karen, wearing all black, hood up, was on my porch. At first, she crouched by the mailbox. Then slowly she moved toward the door, gloved hands reaching for the knob. She hesitated, glanced around, then pulled something from her bag, a small tool, thin and metallic. She was picking my lock. I stayed quiet, my pulse steady. When the door creaked open, she stepped inside like she owned the place. Flashlight in hand, eyes darting across my hallway. She muttered under her breath, something about inspections and evidence of violations. I let her walk a few steps in. Let her think she was winning. Then I turned on the light. She froze, mid-step, face caught in a beam of warm yellow light. "Evening, Brenda," I said softly. "You're out late." Her eyes went wide, but she tried to recover, straightened her back, lifted her chin. I have the right to inspect—" "No," I cut in gently. "You don't." Her lips trembled, but she forced that fake smile. "You think you can intimidate me? I'll have you reported for harassment." I stepped forward, slow and calm, the way I'd approached armed suspects before. "You broke into my house. You stole mail. You forged HOA documents. You've been stalking me for weeks. Lies," she snapped, voice cracking. "I'm the president. I can enter any property under Community Code 6.1. I almost laughed. "That's not real, Brenda." Then without a word, I reached into my jacket and pulled out my wallet, flipped it open. Badge. Her face drained of color. You're a cop?" "Undercover," I said evenly. "Or I was. Retired now. But you know what that means, don't you?" She took a step back, hands trembling. "This is harassment!" "You can't—" I nodded toward the corner. "You see that red light?" Her gaze followed. She saw it, the small blinking LED above the doorway. That's a live recording. Audio and video. Every second of what you just did is saved. She tried to speak, but nothing came out. For the first time, she wasn't angry. She was scared. That's when the fear hit her face, I thought. That flicker of realization that everything she'd built on intimidation had just collapsed under truth. I called it in. Calm voice, simple report. Trespasser detained, potential break-in. Oak Ridge Estates. Then I just stood there with her in silence as the sirens grew louder. The neighbors started peeking through their windows, porch lights flicking on, curtains moving. You could feel the shift in the air. For months, she'd ruled this street like a queen. Now her kingdom was watching her crumble. When the red and blue lights splashed across her face, she looked up at me, eyes wide, voice shaking. "Please, don't ruin my life." I met her gaze. "You did that yourself." The officers stepped forward. I handed over the footage. They cuffed her quietly, reading her rights as the neighbors whispered from their porches. As they took her away, I stood in the doorway of my peaceful home, the same one I dreamed of retiring in. The night was finally still again, but I knew this wasn't just a win. It was a turning point. Because the truth about people like her is simple. They never believe they're wrong until the lights and sirens prove it. And that night, Oak Ridge Estates learned exactly who their queen really was. The night she was arrested, the entire neighborhood watched from behind their blinds. Red and blue lights painted the perfect little cul-de-sac in colors it had never seen before. For once, Karen Stewart wasn't the one in control. No clipboard, no commands, no speeches about community standards, just silence. The click of handcuffs and the soft murmur of officers reading her rights. I stood at my doorway, arms crossed, watching her world shrink to the backseat of a cruiser. For months, she had been the self-appointed queen of Oak Ridge Estates. And now she was just another headline waiting to happen. The next morning felt different. No HOA emails, no mysterious violations, no shadow hovering behind blinds as I walked to my mailbox. Instead, neighbors started emerging, the same ones who'd once crossed the street to avoid her gaze. They stopped by, hesitant at first, offering small smiles, awkward hellos. "Did that really happen?" one woman asked, clutching her coffee mug like a shield. "Yeah," I said, "and it's all on record." That seemed to loosen something in her. "I always knew she went too far," she said. "She fined us for a bird feeder once. Said it attracted undesirable wildlife." We both laughed. A short, tired laugh that came from the kind of exhaustion you only get from living under someone else's control for too long. And as word spread, so did the stories. At the courthouse weeks later, the gallery was full. People from all over Oak Ridge sat in the pews, quiet but alert, witnesses, victims, neighbors who'd been too scared to speak before. One by one, they took the stand. A retired teacher who'd been fined for her front porch plants. A single dad who'd been threatened with eviction because his mailbox wasn't modern. A widow who'd received dozens of fake notices, all traced back to Karen's personal computer. Each story was another brick in the wall she'd built around herself, and another one torn down. Karen sat at the defense table, her lawyer flipping papers, but her eyes stayed low. The arrogance that had once filled every corner of her posture was gone. When the footage from my security camera played, her breaking into my house, her voice insisting she had authority, the room went dead quiet. Even she couldn't look at it. That moment was the turning point. The verdict wasn't dramatic. It didn't need to be. Fraud, harassment, trespassing, 6 months jail time, community service, a lifetime ban from serving on any HOA board. But more than that, she lost her mask, the reputation she'd guarded so fiercely. Responsible citizen, community leader, pillar of order, was gone. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The woman obsessed with rules was finally punished by them. When the dust settled, the HOA collapsed within weeks. No one wanted to step up and fill her shoes. Too much baggage, too much fear. Instead, a small committee of actual volunteers took over. Friendly folks who cared more about clean parks than color-coordinated fences. We started having community barbecues again. The laughter came back. Kids rode bikes without someone snapping photos of them violating property lines. And every time I walked past her empty house, for sale sign leaning slightly in the wind, I felt something unexpected, not triumph, not revenge, relief, pure, unfiltered relief. One evening, about a month after the trial, I was watering my garden when her daughter, the one who'd always stayed quiet during the chaos, stopped by. She looked tired but calm. "I wanted to say thank you," she said softly. "For not making it worse," I shrugged. "It was never about making it worse. Just about making it stop," she nodded. "You could have humiliated her, but you didn't. You just let the truth do it." "Truth's louder than yelling," I said, eventually. She smiled at that, a small, grateful smile, and walked away. That was when it really sank in. No one wins these wars. Everyone loses something, but if you're lucky, you get peace back. Over time, Oak Ridge Estates healed. The fences were still perfectly painted, the lawns still trimmed. But now it wasn't fear keeping them that way. It was pride. Neighbors started waving again. Kids played on the sidewalks. The sound of laughter replaced the sound of complaint letters being taped to doors. And me? I finally started sleeping through the night. I'd moved there to escape the noise of my past life, the sirens, the chaos, the constant fight. I just never expected to find another kind of battle waiting behind white picket fences. But that's the thing about people like Karen. They think power gives them purpose. They mistake control for strength and fear for respect until both are taken away. Sometimes I still catch myself glancing toward her old house, half expecting to see that figure standing in the window, clipboard in hand, judging the world, but it's quiet now, peaceful, and peace. I've learned doesn't mean the absence of conflict. It means knowing how to end it without losing yourself in the process. I didn't move here to start a war, but sometimes peace has to be defended.